When billionaire Khalid Al-Rahman attended an underground auction, he expected to acquire a rare artifact, not a defiant woman fighting for her freedom. But after bidding 50 million for Amara Bennett, he unknowingly bought something far more valuable, a love that would change his life forever. Yet in a world of power, betrayal, and deadly secrets, can their love survive? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The auction house lights dimmed, casting shadows across the faces of wealthy men in expensive suits. Khalid Al-Rahman sat in the front row, his dark eyes scanning the room with casual disinterest. At 45, he had built an empire that stretched across continents. Oil, real estate, technology, he owned it all. "Quite the turnout tonight," whispered Hassan, his chief of security and the closest thing Khalid had to a friend. Khalid merely nodded. These underground auctions bored him, but occasionally they offered rare artifacts he couldn't resist adding to his collection. "Item number 7, announced the auctioneer, a thin man with slicked back hair and a practiced smile. "Something unusual." Khalid checked his watch. He had a meeting in Dubai tomorrow. He should leave. Then she walked onto the stage. A woman, young, maybe 30, black, wearing a simple black dress that couldn't hide her trembling. But it was her eyes that caught Khalid's attention. They burned with fury, with dignity, with a silent challenge to everyone in the room. "This is unexpected," Hassan muttered. "What is the meaning of this?" Khalid demanded, loud enough for the auctioneer to hear. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "A special arrangement. The lady has agreed to a 1-year contract of service to settle a debt." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Khalid saw the woman's jaw tighten. "That's a lie," she said, her voice clear and surprisingly steady. "I never agreed to this." 2 security guards stepped closer to her on stage. She fell silent, but her eyes found Khalid's, and in them he saw something he recognized, desperation masked by pride. "Let's start the bidding at 1 million. The auctioneer continued smoothly. Hands went up around the room. Khalid remained still, studying the woman. There was something about her that unsettled him. 5 million, called out Viktor Petrova, a Russian businessman Khalid despised. The woman flinched, and Khalid saw fear flash across her face at Victor's voice. 10 million, Khalid said, surprising himself. The room fell silent. Hassan looked at him in confusion. 10 million going once, the auctioneer said, excitement creeping into his voice. 15, Victor countered, his eyes narrowing at Khalid. Khalid stood up. 50 million. Even the woman looked shocked. No one dared challenge the bid. Sold, the auctioneer declared, to Mr. Al-Rahman. Amara Bennett stood in the back of the limousine, refusing to sit. Her heart pounded against her ribs, but she kept her chin up, her eyes fixed on the man who had just bought her like she was a painting or a vase. "You should sit," he said calmly. "It's a long drive. I prefer to stand." "As you wish." He studied her with those penetrating dark eyes. "My name is Khalid Al-Rahman. I know who you are," Amara replied. Everyone knew the Al-Rahman name. "Why did you do this?" "I'm more interested in why you were on that stage." Amara looked away, out the window at the passing city lights. "They have my son." Khalid's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "His name is Malik. He's 7. The words caught in her throat. "They said they'd hurt him if I didn't pay what I owe." "And what do you owe?" "Nothing legitimate. My ex-husband got involved with Viktor Petrova, borrowed money, couldn't pay it back. Then he disappeared, and they came after me." Khalid was silent, for a moment. "So they forced you onto that stage?" "Yes." "And now what do you expect from me?" Amara finally sat down, suddenly exhausted. "I don't know. I didn't expect you." "Where is your son now?" "With my neighbor. They're watching the apartment." Khalid pulled out his phone. "Hassan, send a team to..." He looked at Amara. 217 Westbrook Avenue, apartment 4B, she said, hope rising in her chest. "Secure the building. Find the boy named Malik and his caretaker. Bring them to the penthouse, and Hassan, if anyone tries to stop you, deal with them." He hung up and turned back to Amara. Your son will be safe. Why are you helping me? I haven't decided if I am yet, Khalid replied, but I don't appreciate being lied to by the auction house. And I particularly don't like Victor Petrova. Amara studied his face, handsome in a severe way, close-cropped beard streaked with grey, a scar near his right eye. So, this is about business. Isn't everything? The penthouse occupied, the top 3 floors of a gleaming tower in the center of the city. Amara had never seen anything like it, all glass and marble and stunning views. You'll stay here tonight, Khalid said, removing his suit jacket. Tomorrow we'll discuss arrangements. Arrangements? Amara asked. I paid $50 million for you, Ms. Bennett. In business, that's called an investment. Before she could respond, the elevator doors opened and a small figure burst into the room. Mommy! Malik! Amara dropped to her knees, pulling her son into her arms. Tears streamed down her face as she checked him over. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? I'm fine, Mommy, Malik said. The men said I'm going on vacation. His eyes widened as he took in the penthouse. Is this a hotel? Mrs. Jackson, Amara's elderly neighbor, stepped out of the elevator next, looking bewildered. Amara, what in heaven's name is going on? It's complicated, Mrs. Jackson. Amara stood, keeping Malik close to her side. Thank you for watching. Him. Khalid stepped forward. You must be Mrs. Jackson. Thank you for caring for the boy. My driver will take you home now. One of my security team will remain at your building to ensure your safety. Mrs. Jackson looked from Khalid to Amara, confusion evident on her face. Amara, are you sure everything is all right? Yes, Amara said, though she wasn't sure at all. I'll call you tomorrow. After Mrs. Jackson left, Malik tugged at his mother's dress. Mom, who's that man? Amara glanced at Khalid, who was watching them with an unreadable expression. This is Mr. Al-Rahman. He's helping us. Khalid knelt down to Malik's level. You can call me Khalid. Malik studied him seriously. Do you have any video games? A ghost of a smile touched Khalid's lips. I believe something can be arranged. He stood and pressed a button on a panel. Elena will show you to your rooms. There's food if you're hungry. A middle-aged woman appeared and smiled kindly at Malik. Would you like to see where you'll be staying, young man? I think we might have some ice cream in the kitchen. Malik looked at his mother for permission. When she nodded, he went with Eleanor chattering excitedly about the view. Alone with Khalid, Amara wrapped her arms around herself. What happens now? Now we negotiate, Khalid said, pouring himself a drink. Would you like one? No. And there's nothing to negotiate. I'm grateful you helped with Malik, but I'm not for sale, and yet technically you are. He sat down, gesturing for her to do the same. For 1 year, according to the contract. A contract I never signed, which is why we're negotiating new terms. Khalid took a sip of his drink. I need a personal assistant, someone to manage my household, my social calendar, travel arrangements. The position comes with a substantial salary, private accommodations for you and your son, and full protection from Victor Petrova. Amara stared at him. You want me to be your secretary? Personal assistant, he corrected, and only for appearances. What I really need is someone who can't be bought, who doesn't move in my social circles, who has no connections to my business rivals. And why do you need that? Khalid's eyes hardened. Because someone in my organization is feeding information to my competitors. I need someone I can trust. You don't even know me. I know you love your son. I know you're willing to sacrifice everything for him, and I know you hate being indebted to anyone. He set down his glass. I'm offering you a way out, Ms. Bennett. Take it or leave it. Amara thought of Malik, of the tiny apartment they could barely afford, of Victor's men watching them. If I agree, what exactly would I have to do? Nothing inappropriate, if that's what you're asking. You would accompany me to business functions, manage my household staff, handle my personal correspondence. In return, you get safety, security, and at the end of 1 year, $1 million. 1 million? Consider it hazard pay. Khalid stood up. I have enemies, Ms. Bennett. Powerful ones. Being associated with me comes with risks. Amara thought about it. She had a degree in business administration, though she'd never been able to use. Tired taking whatever job she could to support Malik after her ex disappeared. And we'd live here, in the guest suite. You and Malik would have complete privacy, and Victor Petrova will be dealt with. The coldness in his voice should have frightened her, but instead, Amara felt relief. 1 year, she said finally, and then we're free to go. 1 year, Khalid agreed. Starting tomorrow. He headed toward the elevator. Rest. You'll need... Now, where are you going? He gave her a look that sent shivers down her spine. To make sure Victor Petrova understands that you and your son are under my protection now. As the elevator doors closed, Amara stood alone in the vast penthouse, wondering if she'd just escaped one cage only to enter another. Malik fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the excitement. Amara sat by his bed, watching him, breathe thankful he was safe. For now, a soft knock at the door startled her. It was Elena. Mr. Al-Rahman has returned. He asks if you would join him. Amara followed her to a spacious office where Khalid sat behind a desk, looking at his computer. Sit, he said without looking up. Amara sat, noticing a bruise on his knuckles. What happened with Victor? We reached an understanding. Khalid closed his laptop. He won't bother you again. Just like that? Men like Victor respect power and money. I have more of both. Khalid pushed a folder across the desk. Your contract, read it carefully. Amara opened it, skimming the pages. It was exactly as he'd described. A position as personal assistant, accommodations, security, and $1 million upon completion of 1 year of service. This seems fair. I'm not in the habit of being unfair, Ms. Bennett. Amara, she corrected. If we're going to work together, you should use my name. Khalid nodded. Amara. He said it slowly, as if testing how it felt. There's something else you should know. Tomorrow night I'm hosting a business dinner. You'll be expected to attend. So soon, if you're going to play the part, best to start immediately. Elena will help you find something appropriate to wear. Amara bristled at his tone. I'm capable of dressing myself. No doubt. But the people you'll meet tomorrow judge everything, from the label on your clothes to the way you hold your fork. First impressions matter. These people, Amara said carefully, are they the ones you suspect of betraying you? Khalid's eyes narrowed. Clever, yes, some of them, which is why you'll need to observe without seeming to. Listen without appearing interested. You want me to spy on your guests. I want you to be my eyes and ears when I can't be. He leaned forward. Can you do that, Amara? She thought about Malik sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, about the security that $1 million would bring them. Yes, I can do that. Good. He stood, signaling the end of their conversation. One more thing. The world I live in, it's not kind to weakness. Whatever happens, never let them see you afraid. Is that why you never smile? Amara asked, before she could stop herself. For a moment, Khalid looked surprised. Then his expression returned to its usual impassive state. Get some rest, Amara. Tomorrow your new life begins. As she headed back to her room, Amara couldn't help but wonder what she'd gotten herself into. She'd agreed to work for one of the most powerful, most dangerous men in the world. A man who had secrets, enemies, and a darkness she could sense, but not see. But she'd made her choice. For Malik, for their future, she would play Khalid's game, learn his rules, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to win. The next morning, Amara woke to find Malik already up, pressing his face against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Mom, you can see the whole city from here. Amara smiled, joining him at the window. The view was breathtaking. The city spread out below them, bathed in golden morning light. Did you sleep okay? She asked, running a hand through his curly hair. This bed is so big and soft. Malik turned to her, his eyes serious suddenly. Are we really staying here? For a while, yes. Amara knelt to his level. Mr. Al-Rahman has offered Mommy a job. Is he rich? Very. Is he nice? Amara hesitated. I don't know yet, but he helped us when we needed it. A knock at the door interrupted them. Elena entered with a breakfast tray. Good morning. I hope you slept well. Thank you, Amara said, surprised by the service. Is Mr. Al-Rahman around? He left for a meeting early this morning. He asked me to show you around and go over your duties. Elena smiled at Malik. And he asked me to tell you that the game room is on the second floor. Malik's eyes widened. Can I go see? After breakfast, Elena gave them a tour of the penthouse. It was even larger than Amara had realized. 3 floors connected by a private elevator and spiral staircase. The top floor contained Khalid's private rooms and office, off limits unless invited. The middle floor housed the guest suites, kitchen, dining room and several sitting areas. The bottom floor had a gym, pool, game room and home theater. This is where you'll work, Elena said, showing Amara a small but elegant office near Khalid's. You'll manage his personal calendar, correspondence, household staff, and travel arrangements. How many staff are there? Here in the city? Besides, me, there's Maria the chef, Thomas the driver, and 2 security guards who rotate shifts. At the other residences, more. Other residences? Elena smiled. Mr. Al-Rahman has homes in Dubai, London, Paris, and a private island in the Mediterranean. Amara felt overwhelmed. This world was so far removed from everything she knew. Don't worry, Elena said kindly. You'll learn quickly. Mr. Al-Rahman is demanding but fair, and he seems to trust you, which is rare. I'm not sure why, Amara admitted. Perhaps because you're not afraid of him. Elena checked her watch. Now we should prepare for tonight. The guests will arrive at 7. Standing in front of the mirror, Amara barely recognized herself. The dress Elena had chosen was midnight blue, simple but elegant, with a modest neckline and a hem that fell just below her knees. Her hair, usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, had been styled into soft waves framing her face. You look pretty, Mom, Malik said from where he sat on her bed. Thank you, baby. She turned to him, adjusting his bow tie. Eleanor had found him a child-sized suit that made him look adorably grown up. Now remember, you'll have dinner with Eleanor in the kitchen and then straight to bed. It's a school night. Malik's face fell. But we don't know which school I'm going to yet. We'll figure that out tomorrow, Amara promised. For now, just be good for Eleanor, okay? When they entered the main living area, Khalid was already there, speaking on the phone in Arabic. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and trim waist. He looked up as they approached, his eyes lingering on Amara for a moment before he ended his call. Are you clean up well? He said, his tone neutral. Thank you, Amara replied, feeling suddenly self-conscious. Elena was very helpful. Khalid nodded, then looked at Malik. And you, young man, look very sharp. Malik beamed. Are you having a party? A business dinner, Khalid corrected. Very boring for boys your age. I can be quiet at grown-up things, Malik assured him seriously. Something that might have been amusement flickered in Khalid's eyes. I'm sure you can, but tonight you'll have dinner with Elena. She tells me she's making your favorite spaghetti. How did you know spaghetti's my favorite? It's my job to know things, Khalid said. He turned to Amara. The guests will be arriving soon. Remember what we discussed. Observe, listen, but reveal nothing about yourself. I understand, Amara said. And one more thing. Khalid stepped closer, his voice low. Tonight, as far as anyone knows, you're my new personal assistant, who I hired through conventional means. Nothing about the auction, nothing about Victor Petrova. Of course, Amara agreed. I'm not exactly eager to talk about that either. The elevator chimed, announcing the first guests. Khalid's expression shifted instantly, becoming more formal, more controlled. Let the game begin, he murmured, and Amara felt a chill run down her spine at his words. This wasn't just a dinner party, it was a battlefield, and somehow she had become a soldier in Khalid al-Rahman's private. Forestier pass, Maria, the chef, had outdone herself. The dining table was set with fine china, crystal and silver, and the food was exquisite, a blend of Middle Eastern and European cuisines that had the guests raving. There were 6 of Kai, them, James Cooper, Khalid's American lawyer, Sophia Rizzi, his marketing director, Wei Chen, his chief financial officer, Marcus and Lydia Blackwood, major investors, and Robert Sterling, his chief operations officer. Amara sat quietly at Khalid's, right observing as instructed. She noticed how Sophia touched Khalid's arm whenever she spoke to him, how Wei Chen's eyes constantly darted around the room, how Robert Sterling drank too much and watched her with undisguised curiosity. "So, Amara," Lydia Blackwood said during dessert, "how long have you worked for Khalid?" "This is my first week, actually," Amara replied, remembering to keep it simple. "Khalid has quite the reputation for being demanding," Lydia continued, her smile not reaching her eyes. "How are you finding it so far?" Before Amara could answer, Khalid cut in. "Amara comes highly recommended. Her discretion and efficiency are exactly what I need." "And where did you work before?" Robert Sterling asked, swirling his wine. Amara felt Khalid tense beside her. "I was in customer service," she said, vaguely. "How fascinating," Sophia said, her tone suggesting the opposite. "And how did you and Khalid meet?" "Through mutual connections," Khalid answered smoothly. "Now, shall we move to the sitting room for coffee? I believe Maria has prepared baklava." As they stood, Robert Sterling stumbled slightly, bumping into Amara. "Sorry, darling," he slurred, his hand lingering on her waist longer than necessary. "Mr. Sterling," Khalid said, his voice cold as ice, "I believe you've had enough to drink. Perhaps my driver should take you home." "Nonsense. I'm fine," Sterling protested, but Khalid was already signaling to Tomas. In the sitting room, the conversation turned to business, a new acquisition Khalid was considering, a potential expansion into emerging markets. Amara listened carefully, noting how Wei Chen and James Cooper exchanged glances whenever certain projects were mentioned. As the evening wound down, Khalid stood. "Thank you all for coming. I have an early flight to Dubai tomorrow, so I must ask you to excuse us." After the guests left, Amara followed Khalid to his office. He loosened his tie and poured himself a drink. "Your observations? Sophia Rizzi wants more than a professional relationship with you," Amara began. "Robert Sterling resents me for some reason. Wei Chen and James Cooper seem to have their own private communication going on." Khalid looked impressed. "Good. What else?" "The Blackwoods are nervous about something. Lydia kept fiddling with her wedding ring, and Marcus barely spoke." Amara hesitated. "And they all wanted to know how I fit into your life." "Yes, that was expected." Khalid sat behind his desk. "You did well for your first time. Natural, not trying too hard. Is one of them betraying you?" "Perhaps, or perhaps all of them in different ways." He sipped his drink. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we fly to Dubai." "Dubai? But what about Malik? He needs to start school, establish some routine already arranged. While we're gone, he'll attend day sessions at the Brighton Academy. It's the best private school in the city. Eleanor, we'll take him and pick him up." Amara stared at him. "You enrolled my son in private school without asking me?" "It's temporary until we return and can make permanent arrangements." Khalid seemed puzzled by her reaction. "Is there a problem? The school is excellent." "The problem is you making decisions about my son without consulting me," Amara said, her voice rising. "You may have bought my time, but you didn't buy the right to control our lives." Khalid stood, his expression darkening. "I'm trying to help, Amara. Brighton Academy costs $50,000 a year. I thought you'd be pleased." "I don't need your charity. I need your respect." Amara took a deep breath. "If we're going to work together, we need boundaries. Malik is my son. Decisions about him are mine alone." For a long moment, Khalid said nothing, his face unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he nodded. "You're right. I overstepped. It won't happen again." Amara hadn't expected him to concede so easily. "Thank you. We leave for Dubai at 9, Khalid said, changing the subject. "Pack for warm weather. We'll be gone 3 days." As Amara turned to leave, Khalid added, "And Amara? You really did do well tonight. Better than I expected." Coming from him, she supposed that was high praise. But as she checked on Malik, sleeping peacefully in his new room, she wondered how long they could continue this strange arrangement. Khalid al-Rahman was used to control, to power, and she had already challenged him twice in one day. What would happen when his patience ran out? And more worryingly, why did part of her want to find out? The Dubai heat hit Amara like a wall as she stepped off Khalid's private jet. The sky was impossibly blue, the sun blinding. In the distance, skyscrapers rose from the desert like glittering mirages. First time in Dubai? Khalid asked, noticing her wide eyes. First time outside the country, Amara admitted. She had barely slept the night before, worried about leaving Malik. It was the first time they'd been separated since he was born. He'll be fine, Khalid said, seeming to read her thoughts. Elena has raised 3 children of her own, and you can video call him tonight. A sleek black car was waiting for them on the tarmac. The driver opened the door, greeting Khalid in Arabic. Inside the car, the air conditioning was a blessed relief. Amara checked her phone. No messages from Elena yet. Malik would be getting ready for his first day at Brighton Academy. You're worried? Khalid observed. Of course I am. I've never left him before. You're doing this for him, remember that. They drove through the city, past impossibly tall buildings, luxury hotels, and sprawling shopping malls. Amara tried to take it all in, but her mind kept returning to Malik. Our first meeting isn't until this afternoon, Khalid said as they pulled up to a private entrance of what appeared to be a residential tower. You can rest and call your son before we leave. His consideration surprised her. Thank you. The penthouse in Dubai made the one in New York seem modest by comparison. 3 stories of glass and marble overlooking the Persian Gulf, with an infinity pool on the terrace, and artwork that Amara suspected belonged in museums. A staff of 5 greeted them. A housekeeper, a chef, a butler, and 2 security men. Khalid spoke to them briefly in Arabic before turning to Amara. Fatima will show you to your room, he said, indicating the housekeeper. My office is on the top floor if you need me. Amara's room turned out to be a suite larger than her entire apartment back home. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the coast. The bathroom alone was bigger than Malik's bedroom. After freshening up, she called Elena. Malik's excited face appeared on the screen. Mom, I'm wearing a uniform and I have my own desk. He held up a notebook proudly. My teacher is Mrs. Thompson, and she says I'm very smart. Amara fought back tears. That's wonderful, baby. Are you being good for Eleanor? Uh-huh. And guess what? Mr. Khalid's driver took me to school in a big car with darkened windows, like a movie star. After reassuring herself that Malik was happy and safe, Amara ended the call and went looking for Khalid. She found him in his office, speaking rapidly in Arabic on the phone. He gestured for her to sit. When he hung up, his expression was grim. Change of plans. The Al Saud family wants to meet tonight instead of tomorrow. They're key investors in the new solar project. All right. What do you need me to do? Join me for the dinner. Observe, as before. He hesitated. The Al Sauds are very traditional. You'll need to dress conservatively. Fatima can help you. I understand, Amara stood. Is something wrong? You seem tense. Khalid ran a hand through his hair, the first sign of stress she'd seen from him. The Al Sauds were close to my father. They've never fully accepted me as his successor. It was the first personal information he'd volunteered. Why not? My father had 3 wives. My mother was the 3rd, an American he met while studying at Harvard, the most junior wife with the most junior son. His jaw tightened. In their eyes, I'm still that half-American boy trying to prove himself. After everything you've built? That's ridiculous. Khalid looked at her with mild surprise. Perhaps. But in this part of the world, blood and tradition matter. He checked his watch. We leave in 2. The Al Saud compound was a palace in all but name, sprawling gardens, marble fountains, and security that rivaled most government buildings. Amara felt self-conscious in the modest black dress Fatima had selected, with a light scarf draped over her hair. You look appropriate, Khalid assured her, reading her discomfort. Just follow my lead and speak only when spoken to. Inside, they were led through opulent rooms to a large dining area where an elderly man sat at the head of a long table. He did not rise when they entered. Khalid, he said, his accent thick. It has been too long. Sheikh Abdullah, Khalid replied, bowing slightly. Thank you for seeing us. The Sheikh's eyes turned to Amara. And who is this? My personal assistant, Amara Bennett. The Sheikh studied her for a long moment. American? Yes, sir, Amara answered. He seemed to lose interest in her immediately, turning back to Khalid. Sit, we will eat and then discuss business. The dinner was elaborate. Multiple courses of traditional Arab dishes served by silent staff. Amara ate little, focusing instead on observing the dynamics at the table. Besides the Sheikh, there were his two sons, Faisal and Karim, and several business associates. She noticed how they spoke to Khalid, with a thin veneer of respect that barely concealed their condescension. And she noticed how Khalid took it, his face a mask of calm even as his knuckles whitened around his water glass. After dinner, the Sheikh dismissed her with a wave of his hand. Business talk is not for women. Fatima will show you to the garden. Amara looked at Khalid, who nodded slightly. She followed the housekeeper to a beautiful courtyard garden, seething inwardly at the dismissal, but understanding it wasn't her place to object. An hour later, Khalid found her there, his expression thunderous. We're leaving, he said curtly. In the car, he sat in rigid silence for several minutes before punching the divider between them and the driver. Change of plans. Take us to the Palm. What happened? Amara asked once the divider was closed again. They're backing out of the solar project. Khalid's voice was controlled, but she could sense the fury beneath it. Unless I agree to their new terms, which are a marriage alliance. Sheikh Abdullah's niece, Layla. Khalid laughed bitterly. Apparently a $30 million investment isn't enough. They want a blood tie to the Al-Rahman fortune. Amara didn't know what to say. Is that common here? More common than I'd like? Khalid stared out the window. My father would have made the deal in a heartbeat. 3 wives weren't enough for him. And you? He turned to look at her, his eyes hard. I don't sell myself, Ms. Bennett. Not even for $30 million. The car pulled up to what appeared to be a beachfront nightclub. Music pulsed from inside, and beautiful people in expensive clothes lined up to enter. What are we doing here? Amara asked, suddenly aware of her conservative dress. I'm going to have a drink. Many drinks. Khalid stepped out of the car. You can wait here or join me. Amara hesitated, then followed him. Inside the club was a riot of lights and music. Everywhere she looked, the wealthy and beautiful of Dubai danced and drank and showed off. Khalid was recognized immediately. A hostess led them to a private table overlooking the dance floor. Mr. Al-Rahman. So good to see you again, she purred, her accent distinctly Eastern European. The usual? Khalid nodded, not bothering to look at her. His eyes scanned the room restlessly. And for the lady? Just water, thank you, Amara said, when the hostess left. Amara leaned forward. Is this wise? Getting drunk after a business setback? Khalid's eyes flashed dangerously. Are you questioning me? Yes, Amara said, surprising herself with her boldness. You brought me here to be honest with you, didn't you? Well, I think drowning your problems in alcohol is a bad idea. For a moment, she thought he might explode in anger. Instead, he laughed, a genuine laugh that transformed his face, making him look younger, more approachable. You're either very brave or very foolish, Amara Bennett. He shook his head. No one speaks to me like that. Maybe they should. The hostess returned with their drinks, water for Amara, and what looked like whiskey for Khalid. He stared at it for a long moment, then pushed it away. Perhaps, you're right. He stood abruptly. Let's go. Outside, the night air was cooler. They walked along the beachfront, away from the club and its throbbing music. I apologize for my behavior, Khalid said after a while. It was unprofessional. You're human, Amara replied. It's allowed. Not in my world. He stopped, looking out at the dark water. Weakness gets exploited. Always. Is that what your father taught you? Khalid's jaw tightened. My father taught me many things, most of them through his absence. Amara sensed a deep wound there, but knew better than to press. What will you do about the solar project? Find other investors. The Al Sauds aren't the only game in town. He turned to her. But first, we're going to salvage this trip. I have meetings tomorrow with the Ministry of Energy. I need to be at my best. You will be, Amara said with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. Khalid studied her face in the moonlight. You're unusual, Amara Bennett. Most people tell me what they think I want to hear. I'm not most people. No, he agreed. You're not. The next morning, Amara woke to a text from Elena with a photo of Malik in his school uniform, grinning proudly. It eased her worry enough that she could focus on the day ahead. Khalid was already in his office when she went. Downstairs, dressed in a crisp suit and talking rapidly in Arabic on the phone. He looked up when she entered, gesturing for her to wait. When he hung up, he handed her a tablet. Our schedule today: 3 meetings, then a reception at the Energy Ministry tonight. Amara scrolled through the detailed itinerary. You seem better. Today. I took your advice, went back to the penthouse, got some sleep. He adjusted his tie. The car will be here in 20 minutes. Throughout the day, Amara watched Khalid work. He was in his element, commanding, decisive, brilliant. In meeting after meeting, he outlined his vision for renewable energy in the region, deftly handling objections and winning over skeptics. At the reception that evening, Amara stood at his side, noting who approached him, who avoided him, who seemed genuine and who seemed false. She was getting better at reading the subtle politics of Khalid's world. You're doing well, he murmured to her between conversations. These people are sharks, but you're swimming like you were born to it. I'm a quick learner, she replied. As the evening wound down, a tall, elegant woman in a designer gown approached them. Khalid, darling, I heard you were in town. Khalid tensed almost imperceptibly. Yasmin, how nice to see you. The woman kissed him on both cheeks, her eyes flicking dismissively over Amara. And who's your little friend? My assistant, Amara Bennett. Amara, this is Yasmin Al-Fayed, an old family friend. Yasmin's smile didn't reach her eyes. How lovely. Khalid, we must catch up. Are you free for lunch tomorrow? Father has been asking. About you. I'm afraid we're flying back to New York in the morning, Khalid replied smoothly. Another time, perhaps. After Yasmin walked away, Amara raised an eyebrow. Not a fan. Yasmin and I were engaged once, very briefly. Khalid's voice was neutral. It didn't work out. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a business arrangement, nothing more. He checked his watch. We should go. Early flight tomorrow. In the car, Amara found herself studying Khalid's profile. His life seemed so empty, all business deals and power plays with no real connections. It reminded her of the loneliness she'd felt after her ex-husband left, before Malik came along to fill her world with love. What? Khalid asked, catching her staring. Nothing, she said quickly. Just wondering about something. Ask. Are you happy, Khalid? The question seemed to catch him off guard. For a moment, his mask slipped, and she saw genuine confusion in his eyes. Happy, he repeated, as if the word were foreign to him. I'm successful. I've built an empire larger than my father's. I've proven everyone wrong who said I couldn't do it. That's not what I asked. Khalid was quiet for a long time. Happiness is a luxury I never considered, he said finally. My life has been about survival, then success. Nothing else mattered. And now? He looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. Now I have new questions to consider, it seems. Back in New York, Amara was overjoyed to see Malik. He ran to her as soon as she walked through the door, talking a mile a minute about his new school, his new friends, and all the things he'd done with Elena. And Mr. Khalid's driver takes me every day in the big car. All the kids think I'm super important. Amara laughed, hugging him tight. You are super important to me. Later, after Malik was in bed, Amara found Khalid in his office reviewing documents. He looked up when she knocked on the open door. Come in. How's Malik? Happy. Excited about school. She sat across from him. Thank you for arranging it. Khalid nodded, returning to his papers. After a moment, he said, the Dubai trip was successful, despite the Al Sauds. The ministry has agreed to the project. That's wonderful. Your observations were helpful. You noticed things I missed. He set down his pen. I'd like you to take a more active role in my business dealings going forward. Amara was surprised. In what way? Attending meetings with me, offering your perspective afterward. He leaned back in his chair. You have good instincts, Amara, and you're not afraid to tell me the truth. That's rare in my world. I'd be happy to help, she said, meaning it. The work was fascinating and she was learning so much. But I should warn you, my business degree was from a state school, not Harvard. Formal education means little in real business. It's instinct that matters. Khalid handed her a folder. Our next challenge, a potential hostile takeover of one of my smaller companies. I'd like your thoughts. Amara took the folder, touched by his trust. I'll look it over tonight. As she turned to leave, Khalid called her name. Amara? Yes? Thank you for what you said in Dubai. It was the closest he'd come to showing vulnerability. You're welcome, Khalid. The weeks that followed settled into a routine. Mornings were devoted to Malik, breakfast together, seeing him off to school. Then Amara would work with Khalid, attending meetings, managing his household, traveling with him on short business trips. Gradually, she began to see beneath Khalid's cold exterior. He was driven, yes, but also brilliant and sometimes surprisingly thoughtful. He remembered how she liked her coffee. He asked about Malik's school progress. He listened to her opinions on his business deals with genuine interest. And sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite define. One evening, after a particularly successful negotiation, Khalid surprised her by suggesting they celebrate. There's a restaurant I own part of in Soho, he said, as they rode back to the penthouse. The chef is exceptional. I'd need to check if Elena can stay with Malik, Amara said. Already arranged, Khalid replied. If you're amenable, of course. The restaurant was intimate and elegant, with soft lighting and jazz playing in the background. The other diners glanced their way with barely disguised curiosity as they were led to a private table in the back. They're wondering who you are, Khalid said, noticing her discomfort. I don't usually bring companions to dinner. Never? Not in New York. He poured her a glass of wine. I prefer to keep my private life private. Is that what this is? Amara asked. Your private life? Khalid looked at her thoughtfully. I'm not sure anymore. The meal was exquisite, course after course of beautifully presented dishes. Amara found herself relaxing, enjoying the food and the conversation that flowed surprisingly easily between them. Tell me about Malik's father, Khalid said, as they lingered over dessert. Amara tensed. That's not a pleasant story. Few of mine are either, Khalid replied. But I'd like to know. Amara took a sip of wine. I met Derek in college. He was charming, ambitious, we got married young. I thought we wanted the same things, a family, stability. She sighed. But Derek's ambitions got darker. He started gambling, then borrowing money from the wrong people. When I got pregnant, with Malik, I thought it would change him, but it only made things worse. What happened? He cleaned out our bank account and disappeared the day after Malik was born. Amara's voice hardened. No note, no explanation, just gone. Left me with a newborn, no money and his debts. That's how Victor Petrova found me. And you've been on your own since then. It's been Malik and me against the world. Amara smiled sadly. Until recently. Khalid was quiet for a moment. You're strong, Amara. Stronger than most men I know. I had to be. She looked at him curiously. What about you? You mentioned your father had 3 wives. Yes. My mother was the last, the American. She died when I was 10. Khalid's eyes grew distant. My father sent me to boarding school in Switzerland after that. I saw him perhaps once a year until he died when I was 22. That must have been lonely. It was educational, Khalid corrected. I learned early that blood ties mean little. Family can betray you as easily as strangers. Not all families. Perhaps not yours, he conceded. You and Malik, what you have is rare. After dinner, they walked for a while, the night air cool against their skin. Amara was conscious of Khalid beside her, of the slight brush of his arm against hers as they walked. Thank you for dinner, she said, as they approached the waiting car. It was lovely. It was, Khalid agreed, opening the car door for her. As she stepped past him, their eyes met, and something passed between them, a current of awareness neither had acknowledged before. Back at the penthouse, the elevator ride to their floor was silent, charged with unspoken tension. When the doors opened, Khalid hesitated. "Good night, Amara," he said finally, his voice lower than usual. "Good night, Khalid," she replied, suddenly conscious of how close they were standing. For a moment, neither moved. Then Khalid stepped back, allowing her to exit first. As she walked to her suite, she could feel his eyes on her, and something fluttered in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. The next morning, Amara woke to an urgent call from Elena. "Malik has a fever," the housekeeper said. "The school nurse called. I'm bringing him home now." Amara rushed to the kitchen to prepare for Malik's arrival. To her surprise, Khalid was already there, on the phone with his doctor. "Yes, I understand it's your day off," he was saying, "but I would consider it a personal favor if you could come to the penthouse." "Yes, immediately, thank you." He hung up and turned to Amara. "Dr. Patel is on his way. He's the best pediatrician in the city." "You didn't have to do that," Amara said, touched by his concern. "Nonsense, the boy is in my home under my protection." Khalid checked his watch. "I've cancelled my meetings for the day." "Khalid, you have the Singapore call. It can wait." His tone left no room for argument. "Family comes first." The words hung in the air between them. Family. As if Malik, as if she, were part of his family. Before she could respond, the elevator doors opened, and Elena hurried in with Malik. His small face was flushed, his eyes glassy with fever. "Mommy," he whimpered, reaching for her. Amara gathered him in her arms, feeling the heat radiating from his small body. "I'm here, baby. Let's get you to bed." She carried him to his room, aware of Khalid following behind them. As she tucked Malik into bed, she noticed how Khalid hovered in the doorway, his expression concerned. "Is there anything you need?" he asked. "Some cool water and a washcloth," Amara replied. To her surprise, Khalid himself brought them minutes later, along with a glass of juice. He stood awkwardly by the bed, watching as Amara placed the cool cloth on Malik's forehead. "Mr. Khalid," Malik said weakly, "will you tell me a story?" Khalid looked startled by the request. "I don't know many stories." "That's okay," Malik said. "Make one up." Amara expected Khalid to refuse, to make an excuse about work. Instead, he sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "Once," he began haltingly, "there was a young prince who lived in a huge palace. But even though he had everything money could buy, he was very lonely." Malik's eyes fixed on Khalid's face, fever momentarily forgotten. Why was he lonely? Because his father, the king, was always away on important business. And the prince had no brothers or sisters to play with. "That's sad," Malik said. "Yes, it was, but one day the prince found a magical key that opened a door to another world. And in that world he met a brave warrior queen and her son, who was the cleverest boy in all the land." Amara felt her throat tighten as she realized who Khalid was talking about. "What happened next?" Malik asked, his eyes beginning to droop. "The prince invited them to stay in his palace, to fill the empty halls with laughter and stories. And for the first time in his life, the prince wasn't lonely anymore." By the time he finished speaking, Malik had drifted off to sleep. Khalid adjusted the blanket over the small boy, his movements surprisingly gentle. When he looked up and caught Amara watching him, something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. Khalid nodded, suddenly awkward again. "The doctor should be here soon." He left the room, and Amara stayed by Malik's side, stroking his hair and thinking about the story Khalid had told, about a lonely prince who found what he was missing. Dr. Patel arrived shortly after, diagnosing Malik with a common virus that would run its course in a few days. Throughout the day, Khalid checked in regularly, bringing soup that Maria had made especially for Malik, asking if they needed anything. That evening, as Malik slept peacefully, his fever already lower, Amara found Khalid in his office working. "He's better," she said from the doorway. "The fever's down." Khalid looked relieved. "That's good news. I wanted to thank you for today. For the doctor, for staying home, for everything." It was nothing, Khalid said, but the way he avoided her eyes told her it wasn't nothing at all. Amara crossed the room and, before she could overthink it, kissed him lightly on the cheek. It wasn't nothing to us. She turned to leave, but Khalid caught her hand. For a moment they stayed like that, connected by touch, by something neither was ready to name. Amara, he said, his voice rough. Yes? But whatever he was going to say remained unspoken as the phone on his desk rang, the ringtone he used only for emergencies. Reluctantly, he released her hand and answered, "What?" His expression darkened as he listened. "When? Are you certain?" After hanging up, he looked at Amara, his face once again a mask of control. "There's been a security breach at the office. Files are missing, sensitive ones. The traitor you mentioned, it appears so." Khalid stood, all traces of vulnerability gone. "I need to go in. Don't wait up." But as he reached the door, he paused. "Amara, about what happened just now. It's okay," she said quickly. "We don't have to talk about it." Khalid nodded, and then he was gone, leaving Amara alone with thoughts she wasn't ready to examine. About loneliness and family, and the barriers they'd built around their hearts, and about what might happen if those barriers began to fall. And the security breach was worse than Khalid had initially thought. Someone had accessed files related to the solar project, the same project the Al Sauds had tried to manipulate him into a marriage over. "The timing is suspicious," Amara said the next morning, as they reviewed what had been taken. "Right after we returned from Dubai." "Very suspicious," Khalid agreed grimly. "And only 6 people had access to those files. Your inner circle, exactly." Khalid paced the length of his office. "I need to identify the traitor without alerting them. Which means I need a reason to gather everyone that won't raise suspicions." "Like what?" Khalid thought for a moment. "A party. Something social, where I can observe them interacting, where they might let their guard down." "What's the occasion?" "Does there need to be one? I'm one of the richest men in New York." But then his eyes lit up. "Actually, there is an occasion. The Al Rahman Foundation's annual charity gala is next month. We can move it up." Amara nodded. "It's a good plan. But what am I supposed to do at this gala?" Khalid looked at her, and something in his gaze made her pulse quicken. "Be my date. Your date, but I'm your assistant." "Exactly. No one will suspect anything if I bring my assistant to a business function, but being my date gives you more freedom to move among the guests, to listen, to observe." He stepped closer to her. "Can you do that, Amara?" The way he said her name, soft yet intense, made her breath catch. "Yes, I can do that." "Good." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Then let's catch a traitor." Over the next week, Amara threw herself into organizing the gala. It was set for that Saturday at the Plaza Hotel, a black tie affair for New York's elite. All the while, she tried not to think about what it would mean to be Khalid's date, to stand beside him, not as his assistant, but as his partner, at least for one night. On the day of the gala, Elena helped her get ready. The dress Khalid had sent over was stunning, midnight blue silk that hugged her curves before flowing to the floor, with delicate silver beading that caught the light. "You look beautiful," Elena said, arranging Amara's hair in an elegant updo. "Like a princess." Amara hardly recognized herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was glamorous, sophisticated, a woman who belonged on the arm of a man like Khalid al-Rahman. A soft knock at the door announced Malik, who gazed at her with wide eyes. "Wow, Mom, you look like a movie star." Amara laughed, kneeling carefully to hug him. "You think so?" "Uh-huh. And Mr. Khalid looks like a movie star, too." "He's waiting for you." Amara's heart beat faster as she walked to the living room where Khalid stood by the windows, his back to her. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders and tall frame. When he turned and saw her, his expression changed, a flash of something intense before he controlled it. "You look stunning," he said, his voice lower than usual. "Thank you." Amara gestured to his tuxedo. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Khalid stepped forward, holding out a velvet box. "I thought you might wear this tonight." Inside was a necklace of sapphires and diamonds, elegant and clearly expensive. Khalid, I can't accept this. It's on loan, he clarified, from the Al-Rahman collection, for tonight only. His eyes met hers. Will you wear it? The intensity of his gaze made it impossible to refuse. Yes. Khalid moved behind her, and Amara felt his warm breath on her neck as he fastened the necklace. His fingers brushed her skin, sending a shiver down her spine. Perfect, he murmured. Malik watched the exchange with bright eyes. Are you going on a date? It's a work party, Amara explained quickly, but Mr. Khalid is looking at you like Prince. Charming looks at Cinderella, Malik observed innocently. Khalid actually smiled at that, a real smile that transformed his face. Your mother does look like a princess tonight, he told Malik. But you're right, it is a work party. Very boring for boys your age. I don't mind boring, Malik assured him. Can I come next time? Perhaps, Khalid said, surprising Amara. When you're a bit older. In the car, Amara was acutely aware of Khalid beside her. Something had changed between them, a tension, an awareness that hadn't been there before. Remember, Khalid said as they approached the plaza, everyone in that room is a suspect. Trust no one. Except you, Amara said. Khalid looked at her, his expression unreadable. Except me. As they stepped onto the red carpet, cameras flashed. Khalid placed his hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd with practiced ease. Inside, the ballroom was transformed into a winter wonderland, with crystal decorations and white flowers everywhere. New York's elite mingled, drinking champagne and bidding on silent auction items. Khalid, Sophia Rizzi approached, stunning in a red gown. Her smile faltered slightly when she saw Amara. And Amara, how unexpected. Sophia, Khalid greeted her coolly. The gala seems to be a success, thanks to your generosity. Sophia's eyes flicked to the sapphire necklace at Amara's throat, then back to Khalid. The Al-Rahman sapphires, how interesting. Before Khalid could respond, James Cooper joined them, champagne in hand. Khalid, magnificent event, as always, and Miss Bennett, you look ravishing. Throughout the evening, Amara observed the interactions carefully. Wei Chen huddled in corners with various business associates. Robert Sterling drank too much and flirted with every woman in sight. Marcus and Lydia Blackwood moved through the crowd like sharks, networking relentlessly. And Sophia Rizzi watched Khalid with barely disguised resentment every time he touched Amara, a hand at her back, fingers brushing as he handed her a glass of champagne. Dance with me, Khalid said suddenly, holding out his hand. Amara took it, allowing him to lead her to the dance floor, where other couples swayed to the orchestra's music. His hand settled on her waist, warm and firm. See anything suspicious? He asked, pulling her closer than was strictly necessary. Everyone's watching us, Amara replied, trying to ignore the way her body responded to his proximity. Sophia looks like she could murder me with her eyes. Jealousy, Khalid murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Not necessarily guilt. The Blackwoods are working the room hard. Everyone except the people from Dubai, the ones connected to the solar project. Good. Observation. Khalid's hand tightened slightly on her waist. And Sterling? 3 scotches in and getting handsy with the waitstaff. Amara looked up at him. Khalid, is it possible the leak came from outside your inner circle? Possible, Khalid replied, guiding Amara through a turn. But unlikely. The information was too specific. As they danced, Amara was acutely aware of every point of contact between them, his hand at her waist, her palm against his shoulder, their fingers intertwined. Something was happening between them, something neither had planned. Khalid, she began, uncertain what she wanted to say. His eyes met hers, dark and intense. Yes? Before she could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. Security guards were speaking urgently into their earpieces, moving toward the doors. Stay here, Khalid instructed, releasing her reluctantly. Amara watched. As he strode toward the disturbance, his body language shifting from dancing partner to commanding CEO in an instant. Through the crowd, she glimpsed what had caused the commotion, Victor Petrova, trying to enter the gala. Her blood ran cold. The last time she'd seen Victor, had been at the auction house, his cold eyes assessing her like she was merchandise. Despite Khalid's assurances that he'd been dealt with, seeing him here now terrified her. Amara pushed through the crowd, needing to be closer to hear what was happening. She arrived in time to see Khalid and Victor face to face, their voices low but intense. "You weren't invited, Petrova," Khalid was saying, his tone deadly calm. "Come now, Khalid," Victor replied, his Russian accent thick. "Can't old friends have a civil conversation, especially about mutual interests?" His eyes slid to Amara, and a cold smile spread across his face. "Ah, there she is, the merchandise in question." Khalid stepped forward, blocking Victor's view of her. "Leave, now, or I will have you removed." Victor straightened his tie, unruffled. "As you wish. But we should talk, you and I, about what you took from me and what I've taken from you." "What are you talking about?" Victor's smile widened. "Check your phone, my friend. I think you'll find some interesting news from Dubai." With that cryptic remark, he turned and left, surrounded by his own security team. Khalid immediately pulled out his phone, his expression darkening as he read whatever message was there. "What is it?" Amara asked, moving to his side. "The Al Sauds have pulled out of all Al Rahman projects, not just the solar initiative." Khalid's jaw tightened. "And they've aligned with Petrova Industries." "Because of me?" "No." Khalid's eyes were cold with fury. "Because someone gave Victor sensitive information about the negotiation points." He looked around the ballroom, at his inner circle mingling with New York's elite. "Our traitor has made their move." Back at the penthouse, Khalid locked himself in his office, making call after call to salvage what he could of the Dubai deals. Amara checked on Malik, who was sleeping peacefully, then changed out of her gown, carefully removing the sapphire necklace and placing it in its velvet box. She was about to go to bed when a soft knock came at her door. It was Khalid, still in his tuxedo pants and shirt, though he'd removed the tie and jacket. He looked exhausted. "May I come in?" he asked. Amara stepped aside, suddenly conscious of her simple nightgown and robe. "Is everything all right?" "No," he said bluntly, pacing the length of her sitting room. "The Al Sauds were just the beginning. 2 other Middle Eastern investors have backed out of deals. Victor's been busy." "I'm sorry," Amara said, feeling somehow responsible. Khalid stopped pacing, turning to look at her. "Why are you sorry? This isn't your fault. If you hadn't helped me with Victor in the first place, then what? You and Malik would be at his mercy?" Khalid shook his head. "No, Victor and I have been on a collision course for years. This was inevitable." Amara sat on the sofa, pulling her robe tighter around her. "What happens now?" "Now I find out who betrayed me." Khalid sat beside her, closer than necessary. "And I deal with them." The cold determination in his voice sent a shiver through her. "Khalid, what does that mean exactly?" He seemed to understand her concern. "Nothing violent, if that's what you're asking. But they will be ruined, professionally and socially. I take care of my own, Amara, but I also punish those who betray me." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the evening settling between them. Then Khalid reached out, touching her cheek gently. "You were beautiful tonight," he said, his voice low. "Every man in that room envied me." Amara's heart raced at his touch. "Khalid, I know," he said, withdrawing his hand reluctantly. "This isn't part of our arrangement, but tonight when we were dancing I wanted—" He broke off, standing abruptly. "I should go, it's late." "Khalid, wait." Amara stood too, reaching for his hand. "What did you want?" He looked down at their joined hands, then back to her face. "Something I have no right to ask for." The air between them was charged, heavy with unspoken desires. Amara knew she should let him leave, maintain the professional boundaries between them, but something stronger than reason held her in place. "Ask anyway," she whispered. Khalid stepped closer, his free hand coming up to cup her. "Base, I want you, Amara. Not as my assistant, not as my spy, just you." His honesty took her breath away. For months, she told herself that the tension between them was imagination, that a man like Khalid could never see her as anything but useful. Now, looking into his eyes, She saw the truth. He wanted her as much as she wanted him. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of you, but of this, of what it means." "So am I," Khalid replied, surprising her. "I haven't allowed myself to want anyone, to need anyone in a very long time." Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning. But when Amara responded, sliding her arms around his neck, it deepened into something hungry and desperate. Khalid's arms encircled her waist, pulling her against him as though he could eliminate any space between them. Amara felt dizzy with the sensations coursing through her, his taste, his scent, the solid warmth of his body against hers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Khalid rested his forehead against hers. "I should go," he said, though he made no move to release her. "Yes," Amara agreed, even as her fingers threaded through his hair, pulling him back to her. This time their kiss was less restrained, passion overtaking caution. Khalid's hands wandered down her back, over her hips, as hers explored the breadth of his shoulders, the firm muscles of his chest. It was Amara who finally found the strength to step back, though her body protested the separation. "We need to stop," she said, her voice unsteady. "Malik is just down the hall and we need to think about what this means." Khalid nodded, dragging a hand through his hair. "You're right. This complicates things." "Very much," Amara agreed. "But I don't regret it," he said firmly. "Do you?" Amara thought about lying, about making things simpler, but she couldn't. "No," she admitted. "I don't regret it." The smile that spread across Khalid's face transformed him, making him look younger, almost boyish. It was a smile she'd seen only when he was with Malik. "We'll talk tomorrow," he promised, taking her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "When things are calmer." After he left, Amara sat on the edge of her bed, her fingers touching her lips, still warm from his kiss. What had she done? What were they doing? This wasn't part of their arrangement. She was his employee, technically still bound by that $50 million contract. And yet, the way he'd looked at her, the way he'd kissed her, that wasn't a man claiming property, it was a man discovering something precious and unexpected. The next morning, Amara woke to urgent voices in the hallway. She threw on her robe and hurried out to find Khalid speaking with Hassan, his chief of security. "When?" Khalid was saying, his expression grim. "2 hours ago," Hassan replied. "The police are already there." Khalid looked up as Amara approached, his face softening briefly before returning to business mode. Victor Petrova was found dead in his hotel room. "Shot," Amara gasped. "Oh my God, do they know who did it?" "Not yet," Hassan answered. "But there's a complication," Khalid's jaw tightened. "The gun was registered to me, a weapon that was stolen from my office 6 months ago." "Someone's framing you," Amara said, understanding immediately. "It appears so." Khalid checked his watch. "The police will want to question me. I've already called my lawyer." Amara felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. "Khalid, this is serious. If someone went to these lengths—" "I know," he cut her off, "which is why I want you and Malik to stay in the penthouse today. No school, no outings, maximum security. You think we're in danger?" Khalid hesitated, clearly weighing how much to tell her. "Possibly. Whoever's behind this is playing a long game. They've leaked my business information, framed me for murder, and now they'll wait to see how I respond." "What will you do?" Amara asked. "Exactly what they don't expect." Khalid touched her arm briefly, a gesture of reassurance. "Don't worry, I'll handle this." But as he and Hassan left for the police station, worry was all Amara could feel. She explained to a disappointed Malik that they were having a home day, then tried to distract herself with work. Around noon, Elena brought her lunch and the day's newspapers. The headlines were all about Victor's murder, with speculation about business rivals and Russian mafia connections. Several articles mentioned Khalid as a person of interest, citing their known business rivalry. Amara was reading one such article. When her phone rang with an unknown number, she answered cautiously. "Miss Bennett," a woman's voice said. "This is Sophia Rizzi." Amara stiffened. How did you get this number? That hardly matters. What matters is that we need to talk, privately, about Khalid. I don't think that's a good idea, Amara replied. Trust me, you'll want to hear what I have to say. Sophia paused. It's about the murder and your son's safety. Amara's blood ran cold. If you're threatening my son, I'm trying to help, Sophia cut in. Meet me at the Riverside Cafe in 1 hour. Come alone or don't bother coming at all. The line went dead, leaving Amara shaken. Her instinct was to call Khalid immediately, but something held her back. Sophia's mention of Malik's safety couldn't be ignored, and Khalid had enough to deal with at the police station. Making a quick decision, Amara asked Elena to watch Malik and told Hassan's deputy that she needed to step out briefly for a personal errand. The young security guard looked uncertain, but eventually agreed to drive her, waiting in the car while she entered the small cafe. Sophia was already there, sipping a latte and looking perfectly put together in designer clothes, not a hair out of place. Amara, she greeted coolly. Sit. Amara remained standing. You mentioned my son. Talk. Sophia's perfectly manicured lips curved into a smile. So protective. I see why Khalid finds you refreshing. She gestured to the chair opposite her. Please, this conversation will be easier if we're both comfortable. Reluctantly, Amara sat. You have 5 minutes. Did you know that Khalid and I were lovers? Sophia asked bluntly. The question caught Amara off guard. That's hardly relevant to... It's very relevant, Sophia cut in, because I know him better than you do. I know what he's capable of. If you're implying he killed Victor... No, I'm... Not actually. Khalid doesn't get his hands dirty that way. Sophia leaned forward. But he does eliminate threats one way or another. And right now, you and your son are in his way. In his way of what? Merging with Diaz International. Sophia took a sip of her latte. It's the deal of a lifetime, but Lorenzo Diaz is old-fashioned, very Catholic, very family values. He won't do business with a man who keeps a mistress and her child in his home. Amara felt her cheeks burn. I'm his assistant, not his mistress. Please. Sophia scoffed. I saw you at the gala. I saw how he looked at you. She shook her head. It doesn't matter what you are to him. What matters is that you're a liability now that Victor's murder has put him in the spotlight. Why are you telling me this? What do you want? Sophia's expression softened almost convincingly. Believe it or not, I care about Khalid. And I don't want to see an innocent woman and child hurt when this all falls apart. She pulled an envelope from her purse and slid it across the table. Take this, it's a one-way ticket to Paris for you and your son, plus enough cash to start over. Leave tonight while Khalid is distracted with the police. Amara stared at the envelope without touching it. You expect me to believe you're doing this out of the goodness of your heart? I'm doing it because I understand what it's like to be disposable to Khalid al-Rahman. Sophia stood, smoothing her skirt. Think about your son, Amara. When Khalid decides you're a liability, he won't hesitate. He never does. After Sophia left, Amara sat at the table staring at the envelope. Part of her wanted to throw it away immediately, but another part, the protective mother who had fought so hard to keep Malik safe, couldn't ignore the warning, however self-serving it might be. Back at the penthouse, Amara found Malik watching cartoons with Elena. Seeing him there, happy and safe, strengthened her resolve. She would not run, not without hearing Khalid's side of the story. It was late evening when Khalid finally returned, looking exhausted but relieved. The police are satisfied with my alibi for now, he told her as they sat in his office. My lawyers are working to trace the gun, find out how it ended up at the murder scene. That's good news, Amara said, trying to sound normal despite the turmoil inside her. Khalid studied her face. Something's wrong, what is it? Amara took a deep breath and told him about Sophia's visit, the warning, the envelope with cash and tickets she'd left untouched at the cafe. Khalid's expression darkened with each word. Sophia approached you after I explicitly ordered everyone to stay away from you and Malik. So it's true? Amara asked quietly. About the Diaz merger? The merger is real. Lorenzo Diaz is exactly as Sophia described him. Khalid ran a hand over his face. But the idea that I would consider you and Malik liabilities, that I would hurt you. He stood abruptly, pacing the room. Is that what you think of me after everything? I don't know what to think, Amara admitted. You've been kind to us, generous. But this world you live in, it's so different from anything I know. People get murdered, framed, betrayed. How can I be sure Malik is safe? Khalid stopped pacing, looking at her with an intensity that took her breath away. Because I love him, he said simply. And I love you. The words hung in the air between them, stunning in their simplicity and honesty. You don't have to say that, Amara whispered. I know I don't. Khalid approached her slowly, kneeling before her chair and taking her hands in his. I've never said those words to anyone before, not since my mother died. I didn't think I was capable of feeling this way. Amara searched his face, looking for any sign of deception. She found none, only vulnerability and a hope that made her heart ache. Khalid, you don't have to say it back, he interrupted gently. I know this is complicated, that our beginning was unconventional, but I need you to know the truth, especially now with all these threats surrounding us. He raised one hand to cup her cheek. You and Malik are not liabilities to me. You're the most precious things in my life, and I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe. Amara wanted to believe him. Part of her already did, but the stakes were too high to ignore her doubts. The merger with Diaz, she said. Is it important to you? It's worth billions, Khalid answered honestly. But not at any cost. Not at the cost of you and Malik. And Sophia, were you lovers? Khalid sighed. Yes, briefly, years ago. It ended badly. My choice, not hers. She's never forgiven me for that. So this could be simple revenge, or something more calculated. Khalid's eyes narrowed in thought. Her approaching you, warning you about me. It feels like part of a larger plan. Amara considered this. Could she be the traitor, the one leaking information to your competitors? It's possible. Khalid stood, helping Amara to her feet. But it could be anyone in my inner circle, even people I've trusted for years. Amara thought back to the gala, to the faces of Khalid's executives and partners. We need to find out for sure, before someone else gets hurt. Khalid smiled at her use of we, pulling her gently into his arms. We will, he promised, together. When he kissed her, Amara let herself believe just for a moment that everything would be all right, that the love growing between them was strong, enough to withstand whatever challenges came next. But as she held him, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered caution. Khalid had enemies, powerful ones, and now, through her connection to him, so did she and Malik. The next morning, Amara woke to find Khalid already gone, a note on her pillow explaining he had an early meeting with his legal team. She showered and dressed quickly, then went to wake Malik for school. Do I have to go? He complained. I want to stay with you and Mr. Khalid. Mr. Khalid has important work today, and so do I, Amara explained, helping him with his uniform. Tai, besides, you love school. I know, but... Malik hesitated, his small face serious. Is something bad happening, Mum? Everyone's acting weird. Amara sat on the edge of his bed. Some grown-up problems have come up, but nothing for you to worry about. Mr. Khalid and I are handling it. Are you and Mr. Khalid boyfriend and girlfriend now? Malik asked suddenly. Amara felt her cheeks warm. What makes you ask that? I saw him kiss you, Malik said matter-of-factly. Last night when you thought I was asleep. Oh. Amara wasn't sure how to respond. She and Khalid hadn't discussed what to tell Malik about their changing relationship. We're figuring things out. I hope you are, Malik said, surprising her. He looks happy when he's with us, and you smile more. Out of the mouths of babes, Amara thought. Come on, mister. Breakfast, then school. After seeing Malik off with Thomas, Amara headed to Khalid's office to check his schedule. She was surprised to find Sophia Rizzi already there, sitting across from Khalid, their heads bent over some documents. Amara, Khalid looked up, his expression carefully neutral. Come in. Sophia was just updating me on the Diaz situation. Sophia smiled thinly. Amara, so nice to see you again. The tension in the room was palpable. Amara nodded stiffly and moved to the side table to pour herself coffee, using the moment to gather her composure. As I was saying, Sophia continued, Lorenzo insists on meeting your family before finalizing anything. It's old-fashioned, but that's how he operates. I don't have family, Khalid replied flatly. He knows that. Sophia's eyes flicked briefly to Amara. That's what makes this complicated. Amara felt a chill at the calculation in Sophia's gaze. She was playing some game, one Amara didn't fully understand. Diaz will be in New York next weekend, Sophia continued. He's expecting dinner at your home. Very intimate, very family-oriented. Fine, Khalid said, surprising both women. Set it up. After Sophia left, Amara turned to Khalid. What are you doing? After everything she said to me yesterday. Keeping. Our enemy's close, Khalid replied, coming around the desk to take her hands. I don't trust Sophia, but I need to see her next move. And I need to know if she's working alone or with someone else. And the dinner with Diaz? Will happen, but not as Sophia expects. Khalid's thumbs traced circles on her palms. I meant what I said last night, Amara. You and Malik are not negotiable in my life. Amara wanted to believe him completely, but caution held her back. This merger, it's worth billions, you said. Yes. Khalid didn't try to minimize it. But there are ways to handle Diaz's concerns that don't involve hiding you or compromising us, such as... A smile played at the corners of Khalid's mouth. Such as telling the truth, that I'm in love with an extraordinary woman and her son, and that they've changed my life for the better. Amara felt a lump in her throat. That's a big risk. The biggest I've ever taken, Khalid agreed, but for the right reasons. He kissed her then, gently but thoroughly, until Amara forgot her doubts, forgot Sophia's warnings, forgot everything but the feel of him against her. Now, he said when they finally broke apart, let's figure out who's trying to destroy us. Over. The next few days, Khalid and Amara worked together, reviewing every piece of leaked information, every suspicious interaction from the past 6 months. They narrowed the list of suspects to 3. Sophia Rizzi, Robert Sterling, and surprisingly James Cooper, Khalid's longtime lawyer. Cooper has access to everything, Khalid explained as they sat in his office late one night. And he's been acting strange lately, cancelling meetings, taking calls outside the office. But he's been with you for years, Amara pointed out. Why turn on you now? Money, power, revenge. Khalid shrugged, the usual motivations. Amara frowned, something nagging at her. Have you ever wronged him personally? Not that I know of, Khalid considered. Though about a year ago I blocked his nephew from joining the company. The kid wasn't qualified, but Cooper took it personally. That seems like a small reason for such elaborate betrayal. Sometimes small slights fester into something larger. Khalid rubbed his eyes, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. We need more information. Amara stood, moving behind his chair to massage his tense shoulders. You need rest. You can't fight enemies if you're too exhausted to think clearly. Khalid leaned back into her touch with a sigh. You're right. I usually am, she teased lightly. He captured one of her hands, bringing it to his lips. Stay with me tonight, he murmured against her skin. Amara hesitated. They had spent every night together since his confession of love, but always in her suite, always with the understanding that he would leave before Malik woke. Staying in his rooms was different, a more public acknowledgement of their relationship. Sensing her uncertainty, Khalid turned in his chair to face her. We don't have to hide, Amara, not within these walls. Elena knows, Hassan knows, likely the entire staff suspects. And Malik definitely knows, Amara added with a small smile. He saw us kissing. Khalid looked surprised, then pleased. And how does he feel about that? He said you look happy when you're with us. And that I smile more. Something vulnerable flickered in Khalid's eyes. Smart kid. The smartest, Amara agreed, bending to kiss him lightly. And yes, I'll stay with you tonight. Later, lying in Khalid's massive bed, Amara watched him sleep. In repose, his face lost its hard edges, the constant vigilance that defined him when awake. He looked younger, almost peaceful. She thought about how far they'd come from that night at the auction house, from captive and captor to... what? Lovers, certainly. Partners, perhaps. A family in the making. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. What would happen when her contract ended? When she was free to leave? Would she want to? Would he want her to stay? Khalid stirred, his arm tightening around her waist. "I can hear you thinking," he murmured, eyes still closed. "Sorry." She whispered, "Go back to sleep." Instead, he opened his eyes, dark and intent in the dim light. "Tell me." Amara hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I was wondering what happens when the year is up, when our contract ends." Khalid propped himself up on one elbow, fully awake. "Now. Is that what you're worried about? That I'll let you go when the contract ends?" "No, not exactly." Amara struggled to articulate her fears. "More that this all started with a transaction. $50 million for a year of service. What happens when that transaction is complete? When I'm no longer obligated to you?" Khalid sat up, pulling her with him so they faced each other. "Amara, listen to me. The contract, the money, none of that matters anymore. Not to me." "But it exists," she insisted. "And a part of me wonders if what's between us now is real, or if it's Stockholm Syndrome or something." Khalid flinched as if she'd struck him. "Is that what you think? That I've manipulated you into feeling something for me?" "No," Amara said quickly. "God, no, but other people might see it that way. Might question the foundation of what we have." Understanding dawned in Khalid's eyes. "This isn't about the contract. It's about how our relationship began, about what people will think." Amara nodded miserably. "I know it shouldn't matter, but it matters," Khalid interrupted gently. "Of course it matters." He was quiet for a moment, thinking. What if we tore up the contract, right now? Made it clear that you're free to leave whenever you want, with whatever compensation you feel is fair. "Khalid, that's not... I'm serious." He took her hands in his. "The contract was flawed from the beginning, because you never freely agreed to it. So let's start fresh. You're free, Amara. You and Malik can walk away right now, and I will still give you the $1 million I promised, plus whatever else you need." Tears pricked at Amara's eyes. "And if we don't want to leave?" Khalid's expression softened. "Then stay because you want to, because what we're building together matters more than how it began." Amara felt something tight and fearful inside her begin to unwind. "I do want to stay," she whispered. "I want to see where this goes, where we go." The smile that spread across Khalid's face was like sunrise breaking through clouds. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "Then stay," he murmured against her lips. "Stay, and be mine, because you choose to be, not because of any contract." Amara melted into his embrace, letting his warmth and strength envelop her. For the first time since that night at the auction house, she felt truly free. Free to choose, free to love, free to build a future with this complex, wounded man who had somehow claimed her heart. But even as she surrendered to the moment, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered caution. They still had enemies. The traitor was still out there. And until that threat was neutralized, their happiness remained fragile, vulnerable to forces beyond their control. Next morning, Amara woke alone in Khalid's bed, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. A note on the pillow beside her explained that he had an early meeting with his security team, but would be back by lunch. She showered and dressed in Khalid's luxurious bathroom, then went to check on Malik. To her surprise, he wasn't in his room. She found him in the kitchen with Eleanor, helping make pancakes. "Mom," he exclaimed when he saw her. "I'm cooking." "I see that," Amara smiled, kissing the top of his head. "Good morning, Elena." The housekeeper gave her a knowing smile. "Good morning."
"Coffee?"
As they ate breakfast, Malik chatted about school and his new friends. Amara listened with half an ear, her mind still on the conversation with Khalid the night before. The idea of tearing up the contract, of staying with him by choice rather than obligation, filled her with a cautious hope. After dropping Malik at school, Amara returned to the penthouse to work. She was reviewing Khalid's schedule for the upcoming Diaz dinner when her phone rang with an unknown number. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Ms. Bennett?" a man's voice said. "This is Detective Rodriguez from the NYPD. We'd like you to come in for questioning regarding the murder of Victor Petrova." Amara's heart raced. "Questioning? Why would you need to question me?" "New evidence has come to light," the detective said. "I can send a car for you or you can come in on your own, but we do need to speak with you today." I'll come in," Amara said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What time?" 2 o'clock. Ask for me at the front desk." The detective paused. "And Ms. Bennett, it would be better if you didn't discuss this with Mr. Al-Rahman before our meeting." After hanging up, Amara sat frozen, her mind racing. What new evidence could possibly involve her? She had never even met Victor until that brief glimpse at the gala. Her first instinct was to call Khalid, but something held her back. If the police were investigating him for murder, would contacting him make her look complicit? And what had the detective meant about not discussing it with Khalid? She needed advice from someone not directly involved. On impulse, she called James Cooper, Khalid's lawyer. Despite their suspicions about him, he was still the legal expert most familiar with the situation. "James Cooper," he answered on the first ring. "Mr. Cooper, it's Amara Bennett." She took a deep breath. "I need some legal advice." "Of course," he said smoothly. "What's the matter?" Amara explained about the detective's call, the request for questioning, the warning not to tell Khalid. "That's highly irregular," Cooper said, sounding genuinely concerned. "Where are they asking you to go for this questioning?" "The police station, I assume. He said to ask for him at the front desk." "Which station?" Amara realized she didn't know. "He didn't say." "Ms. Bennett, listen to me carefully." Cooper's voice turned urgent. "This doesn't sound like a legitimate police inquiry. Rodriguez isn't one of the detectives assigned to the Petrova case. I know them all. I think someone is trying to lure you away from the penthouse." A cold dread settled in Amara's stomach. "What should I do?" "Stay where you are," Cooper instructed. "I'm calling Khalid right now, and then I'm sending one of my security team to the penthouse. Don't leave for any reason, and don't let anyone in unless you're expecting them." After hanging up, Amara paced nervously, jumping at every small noise. Her phone rang again. Khalid this time. "Are you all right?" he demanded without preamble. "Yes, I'm fine, just shaken. Stay put. I'm on my way back. Hassan is already headed up to you, and Cooper's security will be there in 15 minutes. True to his word, Hassan arrived moments later, checking the penthouse thoroughly before posting himself outside the door. When Khalid finally burst in, his face was tight with controlled fury. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said, guiding her to the sofa. Amara recounted the phone call, the detective's name, the request for her to come alone. "This was a setup," Khalid said grimly. "Someone trying to get you out of the penthouse, away from protection. But why me? I'm not the one with enemies." "You're my weakness," Khalid said simply. "Everyone who knows me can see that. Hurting you would hurt me more than any business loss." The realization chilled her. "And Malik, he's safe. I've doubled security at his school, and Thomas won't leave his side until he's back here." Cooper arrived shortly after, looking uncharacteristically ruffled. "I spoke with the actual detectives on the Petrova case," he reported. "They never contacted you, never authorized anyone to bring you in for questioning." Amara studied the lawyer carefully. If he was the traitor, he was hiding it exceptionally well. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Cooper. James, please." He smiled tightly. "And you're welcome. Khalid and I may have our differences, but we've known each other too long for me to stand by when someone threatens his family." The word family hung in the air, significant and affirming. Khalid didn't correct him. After Cooper left, Khalid pulled Amara into his arms, holding her as if reassuring himself she was truly safe. "We need to end this," he murmured into her hair. "Find the traitor before they make another move. Faye." Been thinking, Amara said, pulling back to look at him. The timing of all this, the information leaks, Victor's murder, this fake police call, it feels like someone's targeting more than your business. They're trying to destroy your personal life too. You think it's personal? Khalid asked. I think it's both. Someone who knows your business intimately, but also hates you personally. Amara hesitated. Someone like Sophia? Khalid's eyes darkened. Sophia has motive, certainly, but she doesn't have the technical skills to hack into my secure files. So she's working with someone, Amara suggested. Someone like Robert Sterling. He always seems drunk, but what if that's an act? What if he's sharper than he appears? It's possible, Khalid acknowledged. Sterling has the technical knowledge, and he's been resentful ever since I passed him. Over for COO. Amara remembered something else. At the gala, I saw Sophia and Sterling talking privately. I didn't think much of it at the time, but they seemed intimate. Khalid's phone rang, interrupting them. It's Hassan, he said, answering. He listened for a moment, his expression growing grave. Bring him up. What is it? Amara asked when he hung up. They found a listening device in my office, professional grade, recently planted. Khalid ran a hand through his hair. Someone's been monitoring our conversations. Hassan arrived with a small black device in an evidence bag. Found it behind the bookshelf, sir. There may be others. Khalid nodded grimly. Sweep the entire penthouse. Every room, every possible hiding place. As Hassan left to start the sweep, Khalid turned to Amara. We need to be careful what we say until we know the place is clean. The implications were unsettling. How long had someone been listening? What had they heard? Her conversations with Khalid, their most private moments, had those been monitored too? By evening, Hassan's team had found 3 more devices, one in the living room, one in Khalid's bedroom, and most disturbingly, one in Malik's room. They were monitoring my son, Amara said, her voice shaking with rage. My 7-year-old son. Khalid's expression was murderous. Whoever did this will pay. I promise you that. That night, after making sure Malik was safely asleep, Khalid and Amara sat on the terrace, the one place they were confident wasn't. Bugged. We need to draw them out, Khalid said, his voice low. Make them think they've won, then catch them in the act. How? Amara asked. The dinner with Lorenzo Diaz on Saturday. Khalid took her hand. We'll use it as bait. Let Sophia believe. She's manipulated me into hiding our relationship. Let her think she's won. And then what? Then we spring the trap. Khalid's eyes glittered with determination. But I need you to trust me completely. Some of what happens might seem troubling, but I promise you, it's all part of the plan. Amara studied his face in the moonlight. I trust you, she said finally. Tell me what to do. Santa's the next few days passed in a carefully choreographed performance. In public areas of the penthouse, Khalid and Amara maintained a professional distance. She moved back to her own room at night, though they both hated the separation. Sophia called daily with updates about the Diaz dinner, each time pushing for more details about who would attend. Khalid deliberately kept his answers vague, letting her believe her plan was working. Lorenzo is very traditional, she reminded him during one such call, speakerphone on so Amara could hear. He'll expect to meet your family, not your staff. I'm well aware of Lorenzo's expectations, Khalid replied coolly. The dinner will meet his standards. After hanging up, he turned to Amara with a grim smile. She's getting nervous. Good. On Friday, the day before the dinner, Khalid deliberately let slip to Robert Sterling that he was sending Amara and Malik away for the weekend to keep things simple for the Diaz meeting. That evening, he and Amara sat on the terrace again, finalizing their plan. You're sure this will work? She asked, nerves making her voice tight. No, Khalid admitted, but it's our best chance to catch them red-handed. He squeezed her hand. I've arranged for Malik to stay with Elena at her daughter's house tomorrow night. He'll be safe there. Well away from whatever happens here. Amara nodded, grateful that Malik would be protected. And me? You'll leave visibly with Hassan in the morning, carrying luggage. Then you'll return secretly through the service entrance. I need you here, but hidden. It was a risky plan, but Amara trusted Khalid's judgment. Do you think they'll make their move during the dinner? Before, Khalid predicted. Sophia will. Want to make sure everything is perfect for Lorenzo's arrival. She'll come early, and if she's working with Sterling, he'll likely accompany her. The next morning, Amara hugged Malik tightly before Eleanor took him for their weekend adventure. Then she made a show of packing suitcases, which Hassan carried to the car while she followed, sunglasses on, head down as if avoiding photographers. 2 hours later, she slipped back into the penthouse through the service entrance, where Khalid was waiting. He pulled her into a fierce embrace. "Are you ready for this?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, trying to sound braver than she felt. They went over the plan one final time before Amara took her position in the hidden security room adjacent to Khalid's office. From there, she could see and hear everything through the surveillance system, but no one would know she was in the penthouse. At exactly 4 o'clock, the elevator announced Sophia's arrival. As predicted, Robert Sterling was with her. "Khalid," Sophia called, her voice echoing through the foyer. "We're here early to help set up." Amara watched on the monitor as Khalid greeted them, the perfect host despite knowing their treachery. "Sophia, Robert, thank you for coming. The staff has everything under control, but your help is appreciated." "Has your assistant left for the weekend?" Sophia asked, glancing around. "Yes, Amara and her son are away until Monday." Khalid led them to the living room. "Can I offer you a drink?" Sterling accepted eagerly, as expected. Sophia declined, her eyes constantly scanning the room. "I thought I might check the dining. Arrangements. Make sure everything is perfect for Lorenzo." "Of course," Khalid agreed smoothly. "The dining room is all set up. Feel free to inspect." As Sophia left the room, Sterling settled onto the sofa, tumbler of scotch in hand. "Big night tonight," he commented. "Diaz is a tough nut to crack." "Indeed," Khalid replied, pouring himself a sparkling water. "But I'm confident we'll reach an agreement." In the security room, Amara watched Sophia move through the dining area, ostensibly checking place settings but clearly looking for something else. Then she slipped into the hallway, glancing back to make sure no one was watching, and headed toward Khalid's office. Amara's heart raced. This was it, the moment they'd been waiting for. She switched to the office camera feed just as Sophia entered, closing the door softly behind her. With practiced efficiency, Sophia went straight to Khalid's computer and inserted a flash drive. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, entering passwords that she shouldn't have known. Amara watched in disbelief as files began copying to the drive. Confidential files about the Diaz merger, about Khalid's other business holdings, even his personal financial information. After securing the data, Sophia moved to the bookshelf where the first listening device had been found. From her purse, she removed what appeared to be a replacement bug, scanning the shelf for the best hiding place. That was when Khalid opened the door. "Looking for something, Sophia?" he asked, his voice deadly calm. She spun around, momentarily shocked before recovering her composure. "Khalid, I thought I left my notebook in here yesterday." "Strange, since you weren't in my office yesterday." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "Or perhaps you're looking for a good spot to plant another listening device?" Sophia's face hardened, all pretense falling away. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult my intelligence." Khalid moved to the computer, nodding at the flash drive still inserted. "Corporate espionage, a serious crime." "You can't prove anything," Sophia said, but her confidence was clearly shaken. "I don't need to prove it." Khalid pressed a button on his desk phone. "Hassan, please escort Mr. Sterling to my office and call the police." Sophia's eyes widened with panic. "The police, Khalid, be reasonable. This is just business." "Is framing me for murder just business too?" Khalid asked coldly. "Is threatening Amara and her son just business?" Before Sophia could respond, the door opened and Hassan entered with a surprisingly sober Robert Sterling. "What's going on?" Sterling demanded, glancing nervously between Khalid and Sophia. "Your partner just got caught stealing confidential information," Khalid informed him. "And I suspect if we check that flash drive, we'll find evidence linking both of you to Victor Petrova's murder and the subsequent attempt to frame me." Sterling's face drained of color. "Sophia, what did you do?" "Nothing he can prove," she spat. And don't act innocent, Robert. This was your idea from the beginning. As they turned on each other, Amara slipped out of the security room and made her way to Khalid's office. She entered quietly, unnoticed by the arguing conspirators. "Actually," she said, making all heads turn, "we can prove everything." Sophia's face contorted with rage. You're supposed to be gone." "Sorry to disappoint," Amara replied calmly, moving to stand beside Khalid. "But I wouldn't miss this for the world. The entire penthouse has been under surveillance since we discovered the bugs," Khalid explained, his hand finding Amara's. "Every conversation, every action, including your little breaking and entering just now, Sophia." Sterling looked defeated, slumping into a chair. "It was her idea to kill Petrova," he said quickly. "I just helped with the technical side. The computer hacks, the bugs. Loyalty isn't your strong suit, is it, Robert?" Sophia sneered. Then she turned to Khalid, her expression changing to one of bitter amusement. "You know what's funny, Khalid? This all started because you wouldn't marry me 5 years ago. You said you weren't the marrying type, but look at you now, playing house with your auction prize and her brat." Khalid's grip on Amara's hand tightened painfully, but his voice remained calm. "You did all this, betrayed me, killed a man, threatened a child because I broke up with you?" "No," Sophia corrected. "I did it because you made me look like a fool, because you discarded me when I became inconvenient. Sound familiar?" She glanced meaningfully at Amara. "History repeats itself, darling. Just wait until he gets bored with you, too." "That's enough," Hassan interrupted, as the sound of sirens became audible from outside. "The police are here." The next hours passed in a blur of police statements, evidence collection and formal charges. Sterling broke down completely, confessing everything in exchange for leniency. Sophia remained defiant to the end, her hatred for Khalid evident in every glare. It was nearly midnight by the time the police left. Lorenzo Diaz had been notified of the situation and the dinner postponed. The penthouse, finally free of intruders and listening devices, felt peaceful for the first time in weeks. Amara found Khalid on the terrace, staring out at the city lights. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "It's over," she said softly. Khalid turned in her embrace, his face weary but relieved. "Finally." "What Sophia said, about you getting bored with me, don't," he cut her off gently. "Don't give her words any power over us." Amara nodded, but the seed of doubt had been planted. "She was in love with you. She was in love with what I represented. Power, wealth, status." Khalid cupped her face in his hands. "What I feel for you, for Malik, it's entirely different." "Is it?" "You know it is." He kissed her softly. "You saw me at my most vulnerable, my most human, and you didn't use it against me. You challenged me, stood up to me, made me better. That's not something I'll ever get bored with." Amara wanted to believe him completely, but Sophia's words had struck a chord with her deepest insecurities. "I'm just so ordinary, Khalid. I don't belong in your world." "You're extraordinary," he corrected, "and my world is wherever you and Malik are." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Amara's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. "I was going to wait," he said, suddenly looking nervous. "Do this properly, with dinner and flowers. But after everything that's happened, I don't want to wait another day." He took her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. "Amara Bennett, I love you more than I ever thought possible. You and Malik have given me something I never had, a real family. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Amara's eyes. "Khalid, Are you?" "Sure, what about your business, your reputation? None of that matters without you." He squeezed her hand gently. "I almost lost you today. I don't ever want to feel that fear again." "But we've only known each other for 6 months," she protested, weakly. "And in that time you've seen the worst of me, the best of me, and everything in between." Khalid smiled. "Besides, I'm technically already $50 million invested in this relationship." Despite herself, Amara laughed. "That's a terrible proposal line. Then say yes and put me out of my misery." Looking into his eyes, Amara saw everything she needed to see: love, commitment, a future together. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Khalid slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that took her breath away. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling. "There's one more person we need to ask," Amara reminded him. "Malik." Khalid nodded. "Think he'll approve?" "Are you kidding? He already thinks you're a superhero." The next morning, they drove to Elena's daughter's house to pick up Malik. Amara was nervous, not about Malik's reaction to the engagement, but about his reaction to everything that had happened. He came bounding out of the house when their car pulled up, launching himself into Amara's arms. "Mom, did you catch the bad guys?" Amara hugged him tight. "Yes, baby, the bad guys are gone." Malik turned to Khalid, his small face serious. "Did you protect my mom like you promised?" Khalid knelt to Malik's level. "I did my best. But you know what? Your mom is pretty good at protecting herself too. She's very brave." Malik nodded solemnly. "I know, she's the bravest." Then he noticed the ring on Amara's finger. "What's that?" Amara and Khalid exchanged glances. "Well," she began carefully, "Khalid has asked me to marry him. That means he would be your stepfather. How would you feel about that?" Malik considered this for all of 2 seconds before breaking into a wide grin. "Does that mean we get to stay in the penthouse forever, and I can keep going to my new school?" Khalid laughed. "Yes, it does." "And you'll be like my dad?" Malik asked, his voice smaller. Khalid's expression grew serious again. "If you'll have me, yes. I'd be honored. I'd be your father, Malik." To Amara's surprise, Malik threw his arms around Khalid's neck. "I never had a dad before," he whispered. Khalid hugged him back, his eyes meeting Amara's over Malik's shoulder. The love she saw there made her heart swell. "Well, now you do," Khalid said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I promise I will always be there for you and your mom." The engagement made headlines, of course. The business world was shocked that the notorious bachelor Khalid al-Rahman was not only getting married but becoming a stepfather as well. The society pages speculated endlessly about Amara, her background, how they'd met, whether she was a gold digger. But none of it mattered to the three of them. They were a family now, bound by something stronger than blood or money or contracts, bound by love freely given and received. 3 months after the proposal, they were married in a small ceremony on Khalid's private island. Just family and close friends, the family they had chosen, not the one dictated by business or society. Malik stood proudly as Khalid's best man, guarding the rings with solemn importance until the moment came to hand them over. Amara wore a simple white dress that made Khalid's breath catch when he saw her walking toward him on the beach. Their vows were simple, heartfelt promises to love and cherish each other, to protect their family, to face whatever came next together at I. The reception afterward, Hassan approached them with a gift, the original contract from the auction house, the one that had started everything. "I thought you might want this," he said, handing the document to Khalid. Khalid looked at Amara, raising an eyebrow in question. Together they tore the contract in half, then in quarters, then threw the pieces into the sea. "There," Amara said, watching the paper float away on the waves. "Now there's nothing between us but choice." Khalid pulled her close, kissing her as the sun began to set over the water. "And love," he added, "the most valuable thing of all." Later that night, as they danced under the stars, Malik sleeping peacefully in a nearby villa, Amara rested her, head on Khalid's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Are you happy?" she asked, echoing the question she'd asked him months ago in Dubai. This time, Khalid didn't hesitate. "Happier than I ever imagined possible." "Me too," Amara whispered, looking up at the man who had once bought her freedom and in doing so found his own. "Who would have thought that night at the auction would lead to this? I think part of me knew even then," Khalid admitted. "Something about you called to me, as if my heart recognized yours before my head understood what was happening." That Sounds suspiciously romantic for a hard-headed businessman, Amara teased. You've changed me, Khalid said simply. For the better, I hope. We've changed each other, Amara corrected, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. And we'll keep changing, keep growing together. As the music played and the ocean waves provided a gentle soundtrack to their first night as husband and wife, Amara thought about the journey that had brought them here. From fear to trust, from obligation to choice, from transaction to love. Some might say their beginning was unconventional, even troubling. But standing in the arms of the man she loved, with their son sleeping peacefully nearby, Amara knew that beginnings mattered less than how the story unfolded, and their story, the one they were writing together with every choice every day, was just getting started. 1 year later, Amara stood in the nursery of their Dubai home, gently rocking their newborn daughter Layla to sleep. The baby's tiny hand gripped her finger with surprising strength, her dark eyes, so like her father's, fighting to stay open. She's stubborn, Khalid observed from the doorway, his voice soft with wonder. Like her mother. And determined. Like her father, Amara replied with a smile. Malik tiptoed into the room, careful to be quiet around his baby sister. At 8, he had grown taller, more confident. Can I hold her before she goes to sleep? He whispered. Of course. Amara carefully transferred the baby to her brother's waiting arms, showing him for the 100th time how to support her head. Khalid moved behind Amara, wrapping his arms around her waist as they watched their children together. I never thought I'd have this, he murmured against her hair. What? A family? A home, he corrected. Somewhere I truly belong. Amara turned in his arms, looking up at the face she loved so dearly. The past year had softened some of his harder edges. He smiled, laughed more, allowed himself to be vulnerable in ways he never had before. We all deserve a home, she said, touching his cheek. Even proud, stubborn billionaires who think they can do everything alone. Khalid caught her hand, kissing her palm. I was lost before you, he admitted, running an empire but empty inside. And now? His eyes, warm with love, moved from her face to Malik, carefully singing a lullaby to his sister, to baby Layla, finally giving in to sleep. Now I'm the richest man in the world, he said, and it has nothing to do with money. Amara rose on tiptoe to kiss him, a kiss full of promises kept and promises yet to come. Outside, the Dubai skyline glittered against the night sky, a reminder of the world they moved in, a world of wealth and power and sometimes danger. But here, within these walls, was what truly mattered. A family built not from obligation, but from choice. A love that had started in the strangest of circumstances, but had grown into something real and lasting. The price of that love had been high. Trust given when trust seemed foolish. Courage found when fear would have been easier. Truth spoken when lies might have been simpler. But standing in the nursery with her husband and children, Amara knew it had been worth every penny, worth every risk, worth every moment of doubt and fear. Because some things in life were truly priceless, and what they had built together, this family, this love, this home, was beyond any value that could be named. It was, quite simply, everything.